Hey, it's a pleasure to be here, MTF Labs. Director Andrew Dubber is a great mentor and a colleague on this journey towards trying to either make the world better with technology or make the world better without. Over the past 20 years, I've spent my time and my energy helping real people do real things. Sometimes that's connected with the art world, sometimes the world of education, sometimes the live and music industry. Sometimes it's getting subsidized by talking to rich people about what they're doing and in the process showing them alternatives to what they can do. Sometimes it's getting subsidized by running workshops in other countries and far off remote places alongside indigenous communities, sharing knowledge, learning from one another. Often I'm asked questions or shown something that people believe in, and I always try to flip it into something else. I'm going to start with this text for you to read, actually. This is an extract from The Rise of the Coyote. It's the third edition of Mateira Abierta's summer school, an international residency reflecting on non-Western technologies and indigenous conceptions of the future, held in Mexico City annually, curated by Sarah Garzon. Some of you might have been involved with this, I don't know. So I'll let you just read this. Okay, moving on. So, poetry and the Anthropocene, hey? I like it a lot. They seem to be exclusively mutual forms that have a wide impact on culture. But sometimes words can obscure us from the truth, and it makes me think, what is the right way to articulate what we're all experiencing? Should it be the responsibility of the poets, of the artists, of the academics? Or should it come direct from the people, from the lands and the communities that are living and experiencing this systemic change? To flip this into something else, I would like to ask you bluntly, can we expect technology to bridge this gap and provide us with hope? Just how relevant are technocratic utopian visions these days? Or can we find constructed within the very vexated place of culture a future that is worn on top of the past, worn as some kind of present, both radical and uncertain? One thing I don't like about systemic change is that we the people are always being blamed on the consumer level as individuals for all the disaster that's going on in the world. But on the other hand, who's got the leverage? Who can change things? Because it's definitely not going to be the billionaires who seem intent on burning our planet, pledging their faith to the new digital system. The billionaires are not making the right kind of decisions, so someone's going to have to take agency. My work's always been about acknowledging the disruptive side of technology, the uncertainty of it, of living beside it, the internet. You know, when we got involved, the likes of Andrew Dubbers and I, what was exciting about the net was that it was going to unleash the new unbridled possibilities of a collective creative organism. What's it going to do? Where are we going to go? It was the unknown. And that's why it was sexy. Creating networked installations during the early days of net art around the dot-com boom, tech was always a very uncertain element of my practice. The Wi-Fi, the RFID, the Arduino, the open sockets, the PHP, all had a tendency towards corruption and failure. In some ways, over the past 15 years or so, as I've traveled recently, 15 years internationally with British techno and the audio-visual performance scene alongside the ACT planetary assault systems, I've learned to deal with uncertainty every time that I stand up on a stage. When I'm in front of an audience, there's always this element of uncertainty. We have a map, we see the coordinates, we know where we'd like to get to, but the journey's never the same, and that's exactly what it should be, right? And many of our most memorable lived experiences are the ones that surprise and astonish us the most, rising out of something very uncertain. So how can we allow a level of uncertainty within our systems? How do we design something that keeps our actions and our responses present, immediate? And in some way, the topic of this talk, which I've titled Radical Uncertainty, is all about this. All about the what happens next. As technologists, artists, educators, I believe it's important that we keep the human agenda within the 21st century. My first attempt at this was in 2006 for the FutureEverything Festival, founded by creative director Drew Hemmant. Drew Hemmant's gone on to do wonderful projects, one right now with Horizon 2020 called The Grow Lab, which I recommend you look at if you haven't seen it. For FutureEverything, Bump was my first commissioned media installation. The theme was mapping the city. City mapping was a new thing back then, and the interfaces that I was playing with made all sorts of online and offline interactions possible. The installation was set up around the city of Manchester. It was disruptive. I saw it as intrusive entertainment. It occupied personal space that in those days was still not outlawed. Online events had offline consequences. Online game playing translated into sonic blasts in various locations out towards an unsuspecting festival audience, situated at bus stops in cafes. It came complete with live cam feeds and custom-built horns and DIY touchscreens. And it was all interacted with very loosely, with a loose security system driven by Adobe Flash and Max MSP. It was all very easy to exploit. To add context, I was trying to reintroduce ground, or what Marshall McLuhan called the media environment. This was about not getting lost looking at the media, but looking at the environment of the media, which is both where it came from and where it's going. What is our media environment obsolescing into? What's it flipping into? What happens next? So in these early days, I was interested in making digital public encounters more familiar, more approachable, how to lead an audience to investigate and bridge the digital and the public. And this is what I intended to do with the World Wide Web, which was a follow-up commission for New Media Scotland. And it was exhibited in a group show called Young Contemporaries of Digital Art. Followed a similar premise. There was a breakfast bar situated at the Centre for Contemporary Arts in Glasgow. It was connected via the net with the frenetic activities of two farmyard hens in a community farm some 60 miles away. Two activities immediately understandable but widely separated. An egg gets laid on a farm and returns gallery goers with free toast from the web-enabled toaster. Each peck from the hen on a tin full of feed and sensors skipped a pet-controlled iTunes playlist forward randomly, resulting in a chaotic stream of hen-pecked tunes. It sounded something like this. Chicken. Chicken. Okay, did you hear that okay? Good. So, yeah, of course, the playlist was crafted by myself, but it was controlled by the chickens. Giving over the control, bringing in this uncertainty into that moment of that present. Another one, Maracatac. Maracatac was an 8-bit Latino-based percussive interface, an audiovisual instrument created for Pixelazo in 2007. The Colombian node of the international electronic art network Pixelazo. We might have some Finnish folk in the audience, I don't know. The creative director, Juha Huskonen, incredible chap, formed to create encounters between indigenous communities and the global electronic art scene. I created Maracatac. It was the result of an 8-week residency performing various events, facilitating lo-fi digital workshops. It combined the physical sensibility of an authentic pair of maracas with an entirely different end result deriving from westernized 8-bit game aesthetics. And it was in Comuna 13, in one of the marginal neighborhoods of Medellin, which had seen the most turmoil and trauma ever due to the war against occupied territories and the Black Hawk helicopters that had rained down bullets indiscriminately on their neighborhood. Some 4 years earlier to when we arrived there, where I met DJ Kid. And DJ Kid, who after playing with my AV maracas all night, returned the next day with tears in his eyes and a letter written by his English teacher that said, you teach us not to pick up guns, but to click a mix. So these are the kind of impacts that we have when we take our tools and we connect at this level, very fundamental level. Portuguese residents in the room, will perhaps be more familiar with my work alongside Festival Forte, the International Electronic Art and Technical Music Festival, held within the Sawtooth Castle of Montemoro Velho, Coimbra, where for the past 5 years, pre-COVID, I took the role of lead art director, developing the work for the festival's generative gardens. These works I see as the designing of digital social spaces, and as so happens, and as always happens when making installations for public interaction, the works have a tendency of realizing themselves after hours and through public use. This one is a reworking of those initial coded experiments by John Conway, the subject of Artificial Life, taking his code, transforming it into a generative floor mat, algorithmic dance floor, titled Get Alive. These pieces that existed within the generative gardens, the beauty of these works is the different lives that they have as different audiences interact with them. Throughout the night, they become a haven for the phased out folk, surrounded at times by a few dozen revelers enjoying the analog video synthesis. And it's from these works that I made a step into the world of NFT, and which is currently guiding my current research through a website, its initial website called nftx.international. Traditionally, live experience has been something that money can't buy. And I know it's not about money, but there's something wonderful about this new monetized financial stream. I have my students coming up to me now saying, Jaygo, for the first time in my life, anything that I make and anything that I've ever made has the chance to be monetized. And with that money, I can do more of the good stuff that I want to do. So I think we need to put our technocratic Marxists to one side for a moment and realize that there's something interesting going on here, you know? So, so now with NFT, we can incorporate these experiences into digital artworks and we can relive them time and time again. This project, it's still within its early developments, and it was recently shortlisted at the Blockchain Futures Summit in Dubai, where I was looking for investment. What's interesting for me is how the blockchain can connect with all various agencies under one organization. For me, it's informed by my experience within live events and the music industry, but really this type of field of the field of activity is limitless. It can be placed into any field and exist in the same way. But the question going forward, I would suggest, is, do we use blockchain to model things that exist in digital space? Or do we instead try to connect blockchain activity to conditions that exist in the physical ground? And that's something that I find really quite interesting, is how can we make the relationship of the NFT with the physical space? How can we build out narratives? And how can we extend our communities within our fields of activity and use those NFTs as a way of creating other stories, alternative stories that exist side by side? So these are a few elements of the NFTs. I won't show you them now, but what they actually are, the fascinating thing for me is that these are all elements that were created for festivals or created for other artists that I've worked with. They start their lives in the digital screen within the software. When I'm designing them for the physical event space, I design them with the physical in mind. They become the physical space and the physical installation. And then there's this further transdisciplinary process, which then takes it back into the digital space. So from digital into physical and into the digital, which is something really quite fascinating. This is, I won't play you all of this, but this is just a little bit of the feel. This is what I used for the investors, you know. This is what I use in the commercial pitch of things, how to sort of present a story around a subject, get those investors interested. This is all content recorded at the festival, Forte. So let me just backtrack to radical uncertainty. Okay, we can watch that. We can go, yeah, but the technology's not there yet, Jaygo. Exactly. You know, it isn't. And there's something that exists in this present moment where we're selling this future, but we're selling it now. Okay, and we may not even get to that certain future, and I don't think we will get to the certain futures, and I don't think those futures that we propose are intended to be got to. And I think there's something about existing within this present radical moment, allowing us to live our futures worn within the present. So this is what it is, and that was the promotional media that I share with potential investors to help them believe in that future. So I wanted to talk a little bit about exstitutional studies. I don't know if any of you heard about that, coined by the culture theorist Primavera de Filippi. And it's about considering what's happening outside of our institutions. What are all the externalized effects of things? How can we account for these things and bring them back into the dialogue? Considering what we share, the conversations and crafts that we contribute, how this gets reused or remixed to create something new, how we can plug this into an academic process and incentivize it, make it open to innovation, and make sure that it has the capability to connect with wider audiences. So within the institutional is a space where we can design systems that have a different logic to how participation and ownership is distributed, not necessarily based exclusively on any one ruling economic power system, not necessarily based exclusively on the academy, but supported by a network of stakeholders. Considering what is outside of our institute as a way of informing and guiding students inside was integral to my experience whilst teaching in Brazil. I spent 5 years setting up a design school, the first British BA program accredited in Sao Paulo, helping students grappling to understand themselves, to become more cognitive with their role within the international dialogue, which is something that Brazil desperately requires. Many coming from a feeling of a cultural void. It's a country mired by the historical mark of underdevelopment, of an unaccomplished modernism, a country, and the program provided a space for examining the problems inherent within this, the problems inherent within feeling authentic, within being authentic, questioning how we can be authentic when our modernism comes from somewhere else. When at the particular stage in life in the 1960s, we look out towards Europe for our model of modernism. How then do we deal with authenticity? How do we deal with originality? And the constitution of a proper and of a local culture. So the outcomes that we created were collaborative, and they were informed by workshops, and they were informed by workshops informed by students, and they were based within expanded media, and they were placed on the net. And this is something that we do annually, and with intention to lead towards NFT as a vehicle of distribution. Last year's outcome was a website which looked something like this. I'll just show you a quick scrim through. So using those vehicles of expanded publication, expanded medias to have these discussions. Encouraging texts, critical texts from artists, from designers, from students, placing the students and the staff within the same space. Okay. So to bring this conversation to a close, because I know I go over time, I always do, sorry dubbers. So to bring this conversation to a close, if we're committed to moving beyond radical uncertainty, we're going to have to contend with the way we make decisions about what's worth building. And if we're going to build values into our technology, we're going to have to think about what are the systems we use to decide what we're going to create and what we're not going to create. Who are the people we're going to include in the conversation, and who are we not? We're seeing some huge reasons why centralization is not working right now, and so looking for new ways to approach this is important. I've been working with technology, art, design, education for over 20 years now, and what's most important to me is that we begin by looking at how other people use our tools, how they adapt to our tools and how they make our tools their own, how we can build this kind of receptivity towards others into our organizations from the ground up. Decentralizing systems gives us some of those building blocks, and it's here where we can see a lot of different institutional innovations already doing this. The new creators of culture come from lots of different organizations and people coming together, able to coordinate and cooperate across difference. So how do we enable this in a way that we couldn't before? And how do we not get siloed from the rest of the world to ensure that what we're doing is interfacing with the right world institutes and structures, and that it's affecting real people's lives in a way that's positive and in a way that doesn't just benefit those kinds of things that would be funded by a large company. Sometimes this space is accused of being excited about tech, for the sake of the technology, and then decentralization for the sake of decentralization. And MFT Labs shows that this is not always the case. I love the kind of examples that have been in discussion today, because they point to what this technology is doing and what the broader movement around it right now is doing. They ask us to consider just what is our theory for change and how would we like it to happen. You know, you can meet your neighbors today, learn to share things today whilst things are plentiful, or you can learn to share them tomorrow when you don't have anything to share anymore. The solution is yours. To go beyond the uncertainty, I believe we need to rethink the tools that are shaping our environment, and we need to rethink those original utopian visions of the internet brought about by the likes of John Perry Barlow, which turned out to be flimsy and false. Okay, sorry, up. And I'll leave you with this quote from Douglas Rushkoff. We're at such the beginning, we're at a real beginning of this, you know, and the likes of those critical media theorists like Douglas Rushkoff, seeing that we're not even close to the limits of what we can do with our physical environments, not even close to the limits of what we can do by tracking the activity of being human with our systems. But just ensure that we're doing it with sincerity, and we ensure that we're doing it in a way that we're really being receptive to those audiences and those people who are working alongside. I'm going to leave it there, okay?
Thank you so much, Jaygo.
Sharing.